Okay, Jamie, I think we had a few items left, or one comment left on this last item you presented on.
I have a second. Is there another public comment?
Is there a public comment on the last item we were on?
My name is Sue Anderson. I'm the business manager for Meadows Union School District, and we are one of the most poverty-stricken schools in the valley. We have over 80% free and reduced lunches. The majority of our kids live at the Country Life Mobile Home Park, and I know we were talking about having 2 and 3 families in a home. We're having 2 or 3 families in a mobile home or a camp trailer. And I really want to thank the IID for providing us with the 7 air conditioners through the LEAP program, and also for being invited here today. I had not heard of the REAP program, and I'm going to take that back, and I really appreciate it, taking it back so I can take it to our families that live in this mobile home park that really need the help. I don't know if they're aware of it or not, but I really want to thank you.
Thank you. Next up, information item 13, review service agreement request for proposal 933 for small business energy efficiency direct install program.
And I've had a special request to hit the high notes on this one, so I'll go through it. We just discussed, this is one of the proposed programs. This would be a vendor that would provide one of the proposed programs in the last presentation. This would be the small business energy efficiency direct install. This would assist qualifying small commercial customers control their energy costs by providing an assessment, education, and installation services for certain efficiency measures. There is no cost to these small business owners to participate. It is qualified based on your consumption or your kilowatt consumption per month. The customers would receive up to $2,500 budget, and it would provide whatever services that they chose off of a menu of items available. By offering a direct, yes ma'am.
Excuse me, Jamie, before you go any further,
Sure.
Would these small business owners have to own the property that they're operating out of, or can they be renters? Because a lot of
Right.
small businesses rent or lease.
I do not believe that ownership is a requirement for this program.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Because we want to give them that $2,500 budget. We offering this, it will optimize these businesses' energy conservation and resource efficiency. Again, we want to give them disposable income or discretionary income. Maybe they want to make improvements to the store, additional inventory, additional staff. We did an RFP, and it was a request for quotation. It went out under IID's old solicitation process. I want to make the board aware of that. It was evaluated based on the criteria above, where pricing was weighted at 40%. It's typical, and again, I'm going to turn around. Based on the executive summary, the organization, experience, technical competence, the method to accomplish the work, pricing was 40%, local vendor preference points, and exceptions to contractual arrangements for a total maximum of 100. The evaluation protocol based on the IID modeling the evaluation was recommended to synergy companies based on the criteria that I gave earlier, and the contract amount that they were looking at was $599,986.30 for a total anticipated kilowatt savings of $2,580,242, or at 23 cents per kilowatt. And what they proposed in terms of this program would be marketing, implementation of the measures, data collection, data management, quality assurance and quality control, support and resolution services with the business owners, and additional administrative support to the extent it was required. There was a recommendation made to award based on a team that evaluated. There were energy, resources planning staff, finance staff, and there was also a member of contract administration that oversaw the process. We're requesting a 3-year contract for this vendor. Again, and we're looking to award to Synergy in the amount of $599,986.30 for the 2013 services. I do have additional information regarding the RFP process. It did go to the Oversight Committee. We did take it to the Energy Consumer Advisory Committee, and we did review it with them and receive a recommendation to move forward to the board. But I wanted to make certain that the board had access to all the information that it wanted before we move forward.
Jamie, does this business currently have business with the IID? Do they perform other services?
They have in the past. Right now, they're a subcontractor to another vendor who won an award under a separate RFP process. So yes, but they were identified in that process as well as being a potential subcontractor. And I know they've performed additional services and programs for IID in the past.
Any questions for Jamie? Comments from the public? Thank you, Jamie.
Thank you. We'll be bringing it back to the board for approval at the next meeting. Thank you very much.
Next up is information item 14, update on Colorado River matters, page 101 of the agenda. Is this Tina Shields or?
Hi, Tina Shields, Colorado River Resources Manager. I'm here to provide you, again, an update on the Colorado River hydrology based on the most recent weather conditions, as well as a quick summary of some of the shortage scenarios looking forward, because I've been asked a lot of questions about that. We'll try to roll through this pretty quickly. This is, again, just the status of the reservoirs on the Colorado River system. You'll see that while they're now less than half full, they've come up 2 to 3 feet as a result of the storms we saw the last couple of weeks. So that inflow has provided a benefit to both Lake Mead and Lake Powell. Granted, it doesn't offset the reduced release from 8.23 million acre feet to 7.48, but it's definitely better to have rising elevations than dropping elevations. Director Benson, you had asked about the last line on this chart that talks about other system storage and how it compares. I wanted to bring this graph back again to show you the other reservoir systems, particularly in the upper basin, that comprise the overall reservoir storage. And you can see most of them are about half full. This is a graphic from last week. I checked the website today, and the elevations are essentially unchanged. So while there has been rain in many areas, it hasn't necessarily filled up these reservoir systems, although it has provided a benefit to the drier soil contents that we've seen in the areas. Back again to just the looking forward chart. This shows with a 7.48 release, that 4 to 8 foot potential elevation drop, and how precariously close we are to that shortage trigger of 1075. You'll also note that in the small text on this chart, they are tentatively forecasting a low reduced for next year. Remember that this was the first year that we have seen that lower 7.48 release, and all signs are pointing towards that next year as well. But we'll see. This rain condition could perhaps indicate a wet winter, and that could help things out. With that in mind, this is the projection for the Lake Powell operating tiers for next year. You'll see that the minimum and most probable are that lower 7.48 release. But on the right-hand side, looking into 2015, there is a slight chance you could have a good rainfall, a good snowpack over the next year, year and a half, and trigger an equalization release, would be a more than average, more than 8.23 release. So again, this is all about the reservoirs working in conjunction and balancing each other to have a coordinated operation strategy. This is just the same chart for Lake Mead showing likely conditions. We're still thinking that for 14 and 15 that we will have normal ICS conditions, which would not trigger shortages to any lower basin users. That doesn't mean there isn't a small chance that something could happen outside of these parameters, but at least the most likely scenarios and the range indicates normal water use supply conditions for 2014 and 2015. So I want to talk to you briefly about the 2007 Coordinated Colorado River Operations Guidelines. There's 4 key provisions in those guidelines that affect the contractors, and in particular, this was a strategy or policy developed in 2007 through a collaborative process with all of the users to try to have better certainty on what the supplies would be under shortage conditions. It turns out that the best time to develop shortage strategies is when you're in a drought. Similarly, when the surplus strategies were developed about 15 years ago, we were having flood control releases. So that's the nature of the business. In these guidelines, the first two things I want to talk briefly about are the ICS program. That was one of the policies enacted through this 2007 interim guidelines. That is a program that allows for extraordinary conservation measures to be implemented by agencies and an offsetting credit for that water in Lake Mead to be received. So it's a storage program for Lake Mead. IID has participated in that in years past. We currently don't have any water in storage because we used the balance for our payback obligation, but we are somewhat limited in our ability to access, and I'll go into that a little bit more on a future slide. The second component of the 2007 guidelines was the 2001 interim surplus guidelines that were enacted to help California have this soft landing to 4.4. We ended up with a hard landing because of the way things occurred at the time, but they're basically modified schedules that would allow supplemental supplies to the domestic water users to help them address water supply issues. Those guidelines were extended through an additional term with the enactment of the 2007 interim guidelines. The third strategy that was in these guidelines was, again, as I've talked about with this changing release schedule, the coordinated operations of the two big reservoirs, Lake Powell and Lake Mead. And this is what brought about the 748 release that we've seen this year. Working in tandem and essentially balancing those systems with each other to try to provide more certainty to the users, in particular the lower basin users who are reliant on upstream releases. And the very last component I want to talk about is the shortage strategies. This is the cutback scenarios. At what point do we start to reduce users' ability to receive inflows? Real quick, moving back to the ICS program, this is just a quick bullet list of the different rules and policies within this program. You have to create that water from extraordinary conservation measures, and the policy defines the specific projects that qualify, as well as the 4 categories, which are tributary conservation. So those are things off-river from lake systems and stream systems that contribute inflow to the Colorado River, imported groundwater, system efficiency such as Brock Reservoir, or these extraordinary conservation programs that we're more familiar with, such as fallowing, canal lining, desal, those type of programs. When you create water and you store it that year, you receive a 5% assessment. So it's like a bank charge. If you put in 100 acre-feet of water, you lose 5% off the top, and that goes to the house. That's the reservoir contribution in order to allow for that storage to occur. Annually, at the end of each year, you're also assessed a 3% evaporation seepage fee. So when it's in the reservoir, you're not going to get out what you put in, and the longer the water is in there, the smaller the volume will be. So that just ensures that the reservoir system isn't taking the losses for storing your water.
I have a question, Tina.
Sure.
We've been talking, some ideas about creating other reservoirs in different areas of the valley, but if this were to happen, let's say you create a reservoir out here and then one south of Holtville, and you store water there, would this also apply? Oh, because that would be our own water.
Once we divert the water off the river system, it becomes sort of IID water.
Okay.
And so these rules don't apply. These are simply for storing in Lake Mead.
Okay. But you're saying
but you will have losses. Anytime you put water in a reservoir, you're going to have evaporative losses.
Absolutely.
So you will take your own system losses, but that will be an internal accounting issue.
But the Brock, if we were to put water there, then that would follow the first concept that you mentioned, which is the bank takes the 5% or whatever.
So Brock is kind of a hybrid. It's a federal facility. It's part of the system, but it's built offline, and it was a special arrangement that was made. The funding entities received ICS credits in exchange for paying to implement that, but those credits were tied more to the financial commitments than to the actual yield. So they received a schedule of what their credit was for funding. The reservoir is actually conserving considerably more than that because it's being used, I think, a lot more than originally anticipated.
I see.
We were originally told it was going to take storm flows and it would be empty the rest of the time. And it's being used as an operational flexibility tool by reclamation, and that is very beneficial to IID.
Thank you.
Again, just on the last bullet points, there are many rules and limitations on the ICS program. IID has the ability to store up to 25,000 acre feet a year. We have a cumulative volume of 50,000 acre feet, so we couldn't exceed that. There's also provisions within the ICS agreement in California for IID to store another 50,000 acre feet within Metropolitan's reservoir system. So that's sort of offline, but it's an opportunity. But there's also additional complications as far as when you could take that water out. And as the elevations on the reservoir system decrease, it gets harder and harder to take that water out. And under shortage conditions, you could be precluded because at that point, it's time for the system to benefit. We have to keep the elevations high, and that's what the water is used for.
Tina, when you talk about imported groundwater, so that'd be Colorado River water into a service area down into the ground for storage?
No, this would be bringing groundwater into the Colorado River system.
So what about the ICS credits they do in Arizona where they put groundwater back into the ground?
Theirs, I think, is an in lieu where they,
The
and I'd
banking?
have to look and see. Arizona does off-stream banking, and
Right.
that's not part of this ICS program.
So it's
That's
completely separate. That's just using their apportionment to Arizona.
Correct.
And then putting it in the ground.
In fact, one of the ideas being contemplated now that the reservoir systems are dropping is what type of incentives or consequences. How can you get perhaps agencies that are taking Colorado River off to store it, leave it within the system? What kinds of protections and guarantees can you provide to them? Or what kind of disincentives perhaps to take it off the system and not actually use it for a consumptive use, but just put it in storage? Because that just drops the reservoirs down further.
Now, is there anything on the table in the future potentially that would raise our ICS levels so that there would be an incentive for IID to leave more water?
I wasn't involved in that negotiation at the time. My understanding was it was unusual for IID to be given that, but I think it's definitely something that we could work towards. There is the reopeners in the discussions. The first would be in 2013 is when you're allowed to go back and revisit the projects list. So I do think that there's opportunities for an expansion, particularly as the water supply situation gets worse. There will be a great interest by the other users in any type of program that boosts the elevation of the reservoirs.
Okay.
So those are opportunities we look to in the longer term, and we see what the groups come up with collectively to incentivize them. So this is probably what you guys are most interested in. These are the shortage triggers. These are the various elevations of Lake Mead and the volume of the reduction in supply. You'll notice first and foremost that California has zero cutbacks. So that's a real benefit to California to have that senior water right so that in the existing defined shortage triggers, there are no reductions to California. You'll see that Arizona takes the biggest hit of the lower basin. They have about 96% of the reduction, which is equivalent to their water supply in comparison to Nevada. Nevada does have a small reduction equivalent to, on average, about 4%. And then with the implementation of the 319 minute with the Mexican treaty, Mexico did agree to reductions under shortage conditions for a 5-year interim period. So the complexity with the Mexico treaty is it says that they'll share shortages, but never before was it defined at what point and how much. So this was a good step moving forward. It was very important during these discussions for Mexico to understand what caused a triggage and to alleviate their concerns that the users could in fact trigger a reduction to Mexico. So at least for now, we have a 5-year period when things are well defined. And I would imagine the next minute that's being discussed will address longer term issues with regard to this matter. I was also trying to give you an idea of the Lake Mead storage system. I've shown you the teacups in the past, but this is a different kind of operational diagram that just shows you the different trigger points that would allow for supplemental water deliveries, which is the top two light blue categories. Flood control surplus, that's more water than we can handle, and they actually spill water, but you could lose ICS credit under those conditions. The second tier of light blue is domestic surplus. That's the frame that we have been in recent years, where there's the ability to take surplus by the urban agencies, although they have not taken that in recent years. The dark blue are the trigger shortages when you start to see the reductions. And you'll notice on the right side, one of the concerns we see near term is, I've mentioned before, Southern Nevada has an intake that very soon will be above water. And so obviously that will be a pressure on the other water users to ensure that the construction project they have going on right now is completed in time to make sure that Nevada does not have a period of time where they can't suck water out of the reservoir, basically. So they have two pipes, and they have a big project that's supposed to be completed in the next year or two if they're on track. So that's obviously a concern, is protecting at least those elevations until that project's completed. You'll also see that, I mean, the elevations can go pretty low. You get down to a minimum intake elevation at Lake Mead of 915 feet. You have power capacity limitations. And then you get down to the top of dead storage. When the reservoir has 0% of capacity, it still has 2 million acre feet in it. But at that point, you're not getting any water out of it. So these are just things to be keeping in mind as we move forward. And hopefully we won't see those continuing elevation drops. But if they do, these are some of the concerns. And finally, just a quick slide to briefly touch on the impacts to IID. As I mentioned, California does not receive a shortage cutback under the existing 3 tiers. I've mentioned before that CAP takes about a 1 million acre foot reduction prior to California even be looked at. The second bullet addresses that, whereas in the authorizing legislation for their project, they agreed that they would be the junior priority holder. They divert about 1.4 million acre feet a year, so they still would continue to take diversions for some time. We have our senior PPR water rights, which provide a different level of protection. But the other impact that IID will see in a shortage that's a lot more tangible is we will lose access to the overrun policy. So that's the policy I mentioned last month that allows us to use up to 10% more than our annual water order would generally authorize. That policy is suspended in a shortage condition, and we will have a hard cap along with all of the other agencies. So it will be a loss of flexibility, and that will be the greatest impact we see. Obviously, we'll have a lot of pressure on us because as a large water user, we have the ability to greatly affect those elevations on an annual basis. So these are the tangible legal and technical impacts, but you will probably feel more than see those political pressures and the concern by the other water agencies as these elevations continue to drop. So I think that's all I have. Unless you have some questions.
Tina, as far as on the river, do all the other water agencies have an apportionment to their users, or typically how do they administer their water in their areas?
I think within water agency contracts, many of them do. That's my understanding. A lot of the other states operate slightly different than California does, because California has individual contractors on the river, whereas other states have an agency that represents the state, and then the water uses occur under those. So it's a little different structure, and the upper basin's completely different. They all manage themselves a little bit more independently. In fact, they don't even acknowledge the Secretary of the Interior as the water master. And you'll see more of that on your tour.
Because one thing that kind of struck me when we were in New Mexico, they were talking about 30 or 40,000 acre feet as being the difference of towns going dry. And, you know, that's rounding error here.
What's very different for IID is the volume of its entitlement. Most entitlements or agency contracts are much smaller. There's a lot of them, but they're much smaller.
Right.
Any other questions for Tina?
Yeah, I've got some. Spend a little time and walk me through this.
I'll try.
We're the major contractor on the river with no storage capacity other than the 25,000 ICS. Okay? And whenever they talk about IOPP, the elevation of Lake Mead, they always look at us like we create the elevation level of Lake Mead. But if you look at the drainage basin on page 3, you see all these storage areas that they have. And here we're talking about upper basin, okay? So I don't know how many acre feet are there, but I just assume that there's probably close to a million or more acre feet that they have stored. Met has their reservoir stored down in the lower part. Okay, that could have been stored at Lake Mead if everybody would have had the rights to store. The elevation would have been better if IID would have had rights to store. Okay, so whenever the elevation gets down, they look at the largest entitlement holder like you're the answer to everything. So, if the elevation is down, they want to get that elevation up. Why don't some of these people pull out their reserves first, their reservoirs? They can still have it at Lake Mead, but give everybody an equal right to keep the water in Lake Mead and have it designated. So, there will be, the elevation of Lake Mead wouldn't be an issue at that time. It might eventually get there.
Well, our old pie chart that I've shown in the past shows 800,000 acre feet of unused apportionment in the last 10 years. That would be 8 feet of reservoir elevation had there not been a junior priority holder. So, exactly.
That was our contribution to elevation.
Yeah.
So when they complain about the early mitigation water to the Salton Sea in 2010, that was 46,000 acre feet.
Yeah, that was a half a foot at best.
Yeah.
Now, the IOPP was something that IID had negotiated because in the transfer, you're cutting it too close to, depending on the year and the cropping pattern and so forth, to give us a little bit of a margin. So in the shortage, that's gone,
Correct.
okay? So our reserves we can pull off is like 25,000 feet.
Very limited.
Yeah, and
Very
MWD's is 500,000 acre feet in Lake Mead, is that correct? Or is it more?
As long as they're allowed to take that water. Once you hit a shortage trigger, it limits your ability to access that and could preclude it completely.
Well, I would suggest that our attorneys look at this ICS. It's my understanding that there's a trigger there when we could opt out or everybody opts out or one opts out and the whole thing falls apart. But it's time for IID to have the ability to store water in Lake Mead. And if it's okay for them to pull our IOPP, then maybe it's okay for us to dismantle the ICS, find our own storage here locally. But at some point in time, we have to have parity with these people. They just keep coming at us. We transfer water, our entitlement goes down. Every time we want to store water, we seem to get blocked. And now we're in a drought and everybody else has storage and we're sitting here, okay, hope the faucet turns on, So at the end, there is no buffer zone anymore, and we have no storage. So it's time to look at this. We're not creating the elevation problem at Lake Mead.
I will tell you that I think a drought changes perspectives. I've seen, I don't know how to describe it, a shift in personalities or regard for IID in the discussions occurring now as a result of the concerns looking forward. maybe it's a sideways glance that they're all wondering what we're thinking and what we're doing. I think that you're going to see more and more conservation projects focused on reservoir storage that don't have agencies' names on it. And there may be an interest moving forward in opportunities for agencies that have large water uses to start to bend some of those rules that in the past have been inflexible because they didn't care whether the reservoir elevations were higher or lower. But you're going to see a push probably in the next year or two on these system conservation projects. There was just an announcement in the paper about a fallowing program in the Yuma area, and that water is system water. It has no agency name on it. It's a space building. So I think you'll see a push by the other agencies to go there, and perhaps our storage is following soon thereafter.
But it
We'll
has
have to see.
CAP's name on it, doesn't it?
No, it does not.
I would be
There's a
wi-
little issue with that. and
Who's funding it, though?
CAP is funding that
Arizona.
project. It's a fallowing program that evidently took out some citrus ground.
Right.
So there
But-
is some question about how wet that water was. But when they went to finalize that program,
If there's CAP's funding it, it's Arizona Water. And it may not have anybody's specific name on it in the system, but as we're learning more about how deals get done and how negotiations are done and side letters are done and side deals are done, you know very well that that 9,000 acres of water, small amount of water, has Arizona's tag on it.
the Arizona, my understanding is Arizona DWR stepped in and tried to say that that was a water transfer and it needed to go through supplemental processes that they were in charge of that weren't exactly what CAP had in mind. So it, by default, became system water.
Well, back to what Director Hank said about parity. We know we're fighting and working towards parity with the minute order 319, 318, whatever you want to call it. And that's what we're fighting for. And I'm hearing positive news that we're getting towards getting that parity. But what our stakeholders don't hear when they engage us is they're concerned about IID getting storage. They hear IID talk about storage, it gets in the local newspaper, but everybody thinks it stops there. It falls on deaf ears. We need to know, the stakeholders need to know that the players for the IID, as they're traveling, going back to these regional, these quarterlies, these federal meetings, that they're carrying the message of we need storage.
So just to that point, this is not the ideal way to secure parity, but a shortage does present an opening for IID. Nobody else has enough water to make an impact.
I think too, whenever we talk about storage, and I hear you quite well, very well, whenever you said something about systems and coming in and working on system. For the IID to protect our entitlement water, we don't need other people coming here and fix our system. We need to fix our system. That should be our effort. As we move forward, we need to move quickly and strongly in our system for conservation, because that is an area, that is a spot where people are going to start looking. Just like they did with the All-American Canal and everything, whether it'll come in there. Well, I think we need to protect that and keep as much water on our farms as we can. I think that's how you keep your water, keep them on your farms.
And there's more areas than just one specific area system. For consideration should be the Highline Canal, as been brought up by the board, Director Hanks. For consideration should be seepage recovery, or wells, as has been brought up by Director Kuhn, or seepage recovery out on the way to Algodones. Just anywhere we can get it done, we need to take it all on and get it done and address it all at the same time. We don't need to prioritize one project over the other. We need to be able to do these projects and multitask and do them all at the same time.
Tina, one thing that I think would be helpful is not just the Colorado River, but maybe come back to the board with a perspective of the California situation with the Bay Delta, because I think LA is getting constrained right now on their resources.
Interesting that you mentioned that, because I think Mr. Kelly mentioned earlier that we're having this water forum in November, and Jason Peltier from Westlands will be prepared to speak specifically on the Bay Delta issue, as well as his agency's reaction to that and efforts that they're taking to shore up their agricultural supplies for the long term. So
Right.
I'm more than happy to do that, and we'll work on getting some other agency perspectives at future
I think,
events.
and maybe an impact to the farmers down here too, but there's more contracts, different things moving back this way that maybe didn't used to exist because they had adequate acreage up there. So it's kind of something that's changing in the marketplace when you have 80% of a valley dried up.
I'm sure that the board's noticed, as I have, that the discord around Bay Delta is ratcheting up, and it's urban and rural, it's environmental and water marketers, and it's metropolitan. But we've always said that Colorado River policy can affect plus or minus Bay Delta. I think now people are realizing that they got to deal with the package.
And I think it goes to this collaborative process to address water supply. The Colorado may be separate from the State Water Project, but it turns out they're all connected because you can't afford to have both go south at the same time. So I think that's one of the things that water managers are learning moving forward is you have to keep your eye on all the different balls and not just the one you're working with in order to make sure that your agency has a long-term plan to deal with these things.
As those disagreement ratchet up, wait till they get into the financing of it.
Oh, yeah.
And then it really get interesting.
Okay, anything else for Tina?
Thank you.
Thank you, Tina. Okay, moving on, information item 14, page 101 of the agenda, update on information item 15, Water Department General Matters, page 115. Mr. Silva?
Good afternoon, Board. Next week, we expect to have some contracts signed for the on-farm conservation programs. That's for the signups that occurred early part of the year. If you remember, we had people interested, but we didn't have any contracts. We expect to have some signed next week, and then after that, we are also going to take the new contracts to the Water Conservation Advisory Board at their next meeting. So after that, we hope to get them signed up as well, which would be for the next round of water conservation on-farm projects. Excuse me. Director Benson mentioned that I spoke at the New Mexico at Santa Fe proceedings, and the basic reason that I was there on the minute 319, and we had an update, and I think I want to do that probably another time and give you a more extensive presentation on all of the issues related to minute 319 implementation. But the one that affects us the most is the turnout at the All-American, at the end of the All-American to Mexico. That's proceeding, but there's some issues that we have to deal with. City of San Diego has a capacity on the All-American. The Bureau wants to work with them to sort that out. There's issues related with how much are we going to charge them for using the system. They're talking about maybe expanding that in the future, and if that's the case, then they do need to buy capacity. Right now, they don't want to pay anything for capacity because it's only supposed to be used for emergency purposes. So there's issues that we have to work out. We're in the process of developing a scope of work for the project so that the Bureau can begin to do the environmental assessment, the federal assessment. And so it's proceeding, but there's still some issues to be worked out.
Jesse, when you're working on these international issues and specifically working with Mexico, do you have much discussion with them about the flexibility or the capacity available in their pipeline out in the Mount Signal area that pumps their water over to Tecate?
That pipeline is basically at capacity now.
It's at capacity.
Yeah.
Have you heard if there's plans to build an adjacent pipeline next to it to increase?
They had a plan to do a private pipeline, and then that fell through, and then the government was going to do one, but they didn't have any money to fund it, and so I'm not sure where it stands today. I'll check up on it, but they do need it. It's just a matter of how it's going to get done and when.
Could you foresee any type of relationship being developed between Mexico and San Diego to take water to San Diego through Mexico?
About 10 years ago, that private company was looking at dealing with San Diego County Water Authority to take some of their water, at least through that pipeline into San Diego, yes.
So that's an interesting subject with the current lawsuits that are going on regarding wheeling rates between Met and San Diego. Because if that does take place, in fact, then that'll create additional capacity in the aqueduct system, which would then put more pressure or interest in our water to getting it to the western coast of California.
Yes, and that's why this board and other boards have been concerned about that additional straw in the river, because it does create capacity that just tends to be used up, and like you guys have mentioned, it's probably going to come from IID. So yeah, I'm not sure when, but they're going to have to increase that pipeline sometime. And I think if the government is involved, they probably won't be looking at other participants, but if it's private, they may, because that was the plan before.
In your mind, Mr. Silva, isn't that specifically what the additional turnout, the minute order 319, is going to create water for? What other water needs do they have in that area of Mexicali? The farming isn't there. The industrial technology development of a park isn't there. The only thing they have out there is a small reservoir system that they would then enhance to pump water over to their coast.
Right now, the capacity of that turnout is exactly the same capacity as their canal that supplies that pumping station. Again, what they keep telling us that this is only for emergency purposes because of that earthquake taught them some lessons, and they're concerned about that. But at the same time, you talk to people from Mexico City. In other words, we talk to the local people, and that's all they care about is the emergency use. But you talk to people from Mexico City, and they're looking at a broader, picture, longer-term picture that includes additional conservation in Mexico that, in their minds, may include us participating with them and using the All-American. So I don't know what all those are, but definitely they do want to talk about that.
Okay. Any other questions for Mr. Silva? Well, thank you, Jesse. Mr. Benson.
I had a quick question. Last week, you brought the system conservation package. I just want to know what the status of that is and kind of the iteration that's going to go through.
Well, right now we're talking to engineering firm Grant David's Engineering to start looking at looking at the conservation system conservation plan items, and we have a meeting planned for Thursday at 1 o'clock with 2 board members and staff, and so we'll get that kicked off. I had thought about bringing back the specific items of the trifolium reservoir and additional seepage recovery items, but I think if we can get a short enough turnaround on this plan, we'll just include it in the plan and bring it all at the same time.
Well, one of the recommendations was just to break it up into different MWAs, because one huge MWA is just hard to manage.
Yeah, we'll find out this Thursday whether if the plan can be redone in a relatively short period of time. We may wait. If not, then my intent is to bring back the projects that are more less controversial, put it that way, the reservoir on the trifolium extension, or trifolium 13, and then some of these seepage recovery sites that we have identified already.
Now, how about the WCAB or some subcommittee of that, people that have been tracking those projects? Are you looking at kind of a regional approach where the guys at the south end are looking at their interties and the guys at the north end are looking at their interties?
I haven't given that much thought. I'll get together with Al, though. We need to talk a little bit about that and see how we address that. Yeah. Well,
all right, because I think it'd be helpful to kind of divide the valley up by quadrants or however you want to do it, but have people that know their area and work with those Sanjeros to really identify the projects that work. Because, I mean, you talk to someone that works the south end, they don't know the north end and vice versa. And, I mean, even within the IID staff, people have been here 30 years that they've never set foot on a certain canal.
That's correct.
And it's just hard to know the entire valley, no matter where you farm. And I think we have to take everybody's experience into perspective and where things stand, as far as, I mean, an engineer that doesn't live here doesn't really understand it. He's just looking at a piece of paper. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'll get with Alan. I haven't really haven't had the time to get back on it, but we will, yes.
All right, thanks.
Anything else for Jesse? Thank you, Mr. Silva. Next up, information item 16, which is a review information on municipal and pipe service water rates, page 116 of the agenda.
Yes, this item is in response to questions that Director Hanks had 2 or 3 meetings ago, where he asked about the rates, when they occurred, when the board took action. Also asked about the service pipe accounts, how many there is, and also asked about delinquencies. The only thing that I do not have on here that he also asked about was the pipe sizes of those pipe accounts. We have them just because of the billing that we do, but I'm not sure that they're correct. So let me take a little bit closer look at that before I give it to you. But we basically have 2,356 service pipes, and then we have 1,145 small acreage accounts. And you can see that the delinquencies on the service pipes are 819, and on the small acreage it's 457. As far as the municipal rates, you can see we spelled out there for you when those increases were approved by the board. And I had also, I think, previously had given you information on the Entrix study and other studies that were done in support of the actions that were taken by the board previously. If there's any other questions that I can answer, but we're looking for direction from the board on how to proceed with this.
Jesse, specifically to the delinquencies, it's $757,249,
Yes,
and that's for pipe accounts.
yes.
And that's for what time period, what years?
The total amount, I believe that we have gone back. You can only go back 4 years, and after that they get taken
Okay.
off the books. So this should be for 4 years.
Jesse, wouldn't it be prudent for the agency to no longer allow to have pipe surface accounts in the name of tenants, rather put it into the property owner's name so there's some type of
Yeah, right
tracking?
now, what we're doing is the dunning or the process to get the delinquent pipe people to pay up is, in the end, all you can do is file a lien, because really we have no good way of cutting off people. Sometimes you can, but most of the times you can't, because they're along a pipeline. For instance, where I live, we're on a pipeline, so you can't really cut off one person without affecting everybody. So we need to probably look at reviewing that and coming up with a better way to.
So it isn't
make
necessarily a problem that the pipe accounts are in tenants' names. It's because they're on a neighborhood pipe.
Yeah, or they used to have these, what do they call them, mutual water pipes, where you would have a pipe and you'd be billing one person, or the leader of that, and then everybody would be paying them. We got rid of that now, so everybody is now uniquely identified in our system. We just don't have a good way to shut them off if they're not paying the bill.
But rather than shut them off, do we just write off these lost revenues? Or
After 4 years, we do, but we need to probably.
why aren't we going after the property themselves?
Well, again, I think what they're going to do now is file a lien against the property. But I believe that there's somebody here from the people that do that are in the energy department. I asked Belen to have somebody available, and I don't know if she had or not, if there's any specific questions of how that works.
If the account is not in the name of the landowner, there's no way to go out.
That's what I'm saying. Well, I don't know how that's going to work, but that's the process that they're looking
But
at.
the landowner should have their name on the account, because there's additional water requirements that are working with raw water that goes to a resident in the country, specifically for water quality issues, that you're supposed to have AAA water delivered to that house for human consumption. Now, you can bathe in the ditch water, the raw water that we deliver, but you're not supposed to drink or cook with it.
Right, and that's what we had to go to
And
individual
that way,
accounts.
by
right?
having it in the property owner's names, you put some enforcement into that type of a requirement for safety purposes, that the property owner then has ownership of some of those requirements, not just the tenant that may be rotating.
Yeah, we're going to have to do something different, because as far as keeping up with these delinquencies, we obviously haven't done a good job. So we need to do something different, and we need to look at that. Whether if we're going to file a lien, I don't know how you do that if the landowner isn't involved. So we'll have to look at all that.
So these responsible parties on your pipe accounts, they're run out of the call center, and Ms. Valenzuela told me she just got a look at this hours ago. So she's going to need more time to come up with some strategy for correcting this gap.
One of the one of the concerns we have when we start looking at the rates, and you look at ag rates compared to municipal rates and so forth, if you look at our ag rates and compare them with other ag rates in the state, it's very favorable. If you compare our municipal rates to other rates as a raw water to other water agencies, likewise, it's very favorable. I think we need to be careful here because we may be opening up a big can of worms. But if you took the cost per gallon that we charge for raw water going to municipalities, I think you would be totally shocked what the amount is per gallon. Likewise, when you pay your water bill, if you look at the cost per gallon, obviously the cost is in the treatment, with all the standards they have to meet and so forth. And I know that we ran into a problem up at Brawley in the earthquake as far as storage goes. Whenever we lost that pipe in that earthquake, it was very critical. I mean, Raleigh got to a critical stage, and we were figuring out how we were going to get water in there to them. So not only does the IID deliver the water, how we deliver it 24/7 with the reliability of it, which creates additional costs for maintaining the canals that go there. But it also serves as a form of storage. So if we look at reducing these rates, say if we reduce it back to the amount that we charge for ag, and the service is based on the same type service, it's going to create some problems. It's going to create some storage problems, reliability problems, and I think even then, if the intent is to get the ratepayers' treated water reduced, I don't think it's going to happen. I don't think you're going to see it. As a matter of fact, if not careful, we can make it go the other way if all of a sudden there's got to be more reservoirs built and so forth. But I tell you where I really have a problem, and I would like to, I wish there was some way we could figure out what is it that the raw water costs, what is the treated water costs, and I know of at least one community that is served by a private water company. And the cost of the water is socialized amongst all of their customers in the state of California. Some of those agencies in other areas, more affluent areas, they may pay close to $1,000 an acre foot. Then it's treated. And so those prices then are socialized back down here. We're selling water to them for $85 or $68 an acre foot. But yet our residents that are in our water district are having to pay at a socialized rate of other areas. And I think there's really a disservice to the people that live here, that live in our water agency, and get billed accordingly. I may be completely out of my jurisdiction, and probably so. But when I drive through this town and I see the trees are dying and the grass is drying up because they can't pay the water, and then on top of it, they associate it back to what we're charging. And I'm telling you, when you figure out what we're charging to the municipals per gallon, okay, it's not even a quarter cent per gallon.
It's a lot less than 1 cent a gallon, yes.
A lot less than 1 cent a gallon. It's less than a quarter cent, unless my math is wrong.
0.02 would I come up with, but
What you come up with?
not even a quarter of a cent.
Yeah, I came up with .002.
0.0002, yeah.
Yeah. And so, you know, 0.02 would be 2 cents.
Right.
So, you know, so when we look at this, there's costs of transporting the water, but that's all we're charging for, is what we figure. And when you go through these studies, it should have the documentation of what we're charging for water. It's done by a neutral group on data that we provide. But I think we need to be careful, you know, if we're going to look at reducing these rates, and I've been an advocate of it until I started looking at all these things. I think we need to talk with the cities first and see where they're at with the costs. But somehow we have to let the public know that when the rates went up, and whenever their water rates had tripled or quadrupled over that time, it wasn't because of the rates that we put on the raw water. It's the cost of treating the water and all the compliance issues. Now, having said that, I do believe that in a transfer like we have with conservation, we'll reach a point where in other areas, I think the general population is ahead of us in terms of education on conservation. I wouldn't be opposed to having set aside in a rate stabilization fund that we set up some type of funding for conservation measures for municipalities. And I'm talking about low flow shower heads and so forth. I think that would be more beneficial to those ratepayers than if we reduce the price. I think it would impact them greater.
I've got a comment on the municipal rates also. I do agree with Director Hanks that there needs to be some type of a correction made. I don't agree with the methodology or the reasoning. However, when it was done to raise the rates for the first time above ag rates, I was not on this board. So who's to say exactly what was understood or what was presented? If we make this correction and it helps the community, specifically the municipalities that are serving the communities, specifically the cities that are serving the residents in those areas, that perhaps is as good as we can do to get some type of financial consideration back and equality to those residents. Beyond that, working with the cities that are purifying and treating the water, we will have to have that further discussion. Board, any other comments on this?
As far as the cities, when I ran for this office, I thought there was a real inequity in what the cities paid versus farms. I had never seen this report from CH2M Hill from 2005, but they kind of go through an analysis of why cities require 24-hour care, and they have to get right on it with pumping to make sure that they never run out. And it does make sense to a degree. I still think that there's a large discrepancy, and you can write a report depending on how you want it to end up, because the drainage side I didn't really understand. But I think it speaks to a bigger question of on the drainage and on storm drains and with the county, how do we work with cities going forward? And, you know, cities are inundated with rainstorms, as we just saw, and the IID rolls out their crews, and there is a thank you, but at the same time, they just expect us to be there. And a lot of that is the water department stepping up on the rainfall power side, on the telephone poles. And there has to be a willingness to work together. And I think we probably need to get the cities on board to talk about their water treatment systems, to talk about what needs they have. I know City of Brawley, where I live, they need storage. They only have one inlet to their water treatment plant. I think other cities are in the same circumstances. And City of Calexico has issues with their treatment plant, often out of compliance or, you know, with seismic issues. So if it's not on the rates, I do think we need to look overall at what we do charge our customers. And right now the QSA, some of that money is set aside to supplement the water department. I think I'm not advocating for higher water rates to farmers, but I think higher rates do cause conservation because no one wants to use more of an expensive item. Right now, it's cheaper for farmers to waste water than it is to pay for water because it can go out their tail box. So I think we have to look at all the assessments that we charge, and it's just part of this rollout of getting more precise on how we use water. So just a little bit of work ahead, Jesse.
Well, it sounds like make sure I understand kind of the direction I'm getting from the board is to maybe set up a meeting with cities and talk about issues related to delivery of water and to the drainage side and see where we are and maybe get a couple of board members involved in a committee. I don't know. I'm not sure exactly how you want to handle that, but certainly we can start meeting with the cities and talk about those issues.
You know, if you concur, there is a vehicle already that in which IID could confer with the municipals, and that's the IRWMP. The cities weren't involved except tangentially in that, but you know, your board came in with the notion that you'd restore some measure of parity between ag and municipal, and what you may need is an updated cost of service, so that at a minimum, the cities realize that even that simple delivery of water in the IID system has added value to them.
Yeah, you know, I was all for just rolling it back, you know, because we use the same canals and so forth. But then whenever this earthquake hit, and then I started looking at the additional services that we do provide to the cities, put it in a little different light. But I also think, you know, the treatment of water in every city is not the most economical way to go. I mean, it's been a kind of a cash cow for the cities, how they generate revenue, and they need it. But at some point in time, it will surpass that, where it may be too expensive, and then they may want to start looking towards some type of unification of a system, where at least a large treatment, maybe have separate distribution of the municipal water. I think those conversations need to take place. But the socialization of the water, for particularly the couple of smaller cities, I think it's a good model to look at whenever you start looking at our energy side and compare going into CAISO, whenever our rates would be socialized with the rest of the state, what the impact is going to be to us and why we need to protect our balanced authority. I know I'm mixing apples and oranges here, but the models are pretty much the same, and we have to be real careful with it.
I think on the treatment side too, a lot of their costs are power costs, so I don't know if there's a way we can work with them on power, but pumping and other things related to cities. You know, if we want to look at their energy efficiency, if a lot of them are strapped for cash, maybe that's something we can do to help them.
I want to make it perfectly clear that this despair did not exist when I was on the board either. So I don't know exactly when it happened, but it happened. But it damn sure didn't happen on my watch. But there's always somebody out there going to whine and cry about something. And when this did happen, again, I wasn't here. But I can certainly tell you, I've heard it said up here a bunch of times today, that when something happens within those cities, the IID has always stepped up and did its fair share, if not more. Now, this last storm, there were trees down all over, and we had people out there cutting trees. And where does that water go? Do we send the city a bill when it goes into our drains? No. But we have to maintain those drains. They have to be there. They have to be ready. They have to be unplugged. And who repairs the damage from all the water that goes through them? IID does. We don't send a bill to the city because a bunch of water came off the city and blew out bridges, plugged pipes, caused of flooding, we have always been there. Now, this is my third term on here. Nothing's changed in that regard. Now, that price, yes, it did change. When I saw it, did I like it? No. Can we do something about it? Yes. But the flip side is, could we start sending bills to the cities to take care of all this other ancillary stuff? Sure. Would we? Probably not. I sure as hell won't support it, but think about it. There's a cost here, people. And the IID has always stepped up to the plate and been a good neighbor. I doubt that's going to stop anytime soon. I just wish people would quit bitching at us.
You know, in my comments with several of the growers, they just asked me, well, what was the increase worth? What was the value of it? And I know at one time we figured it was somewhere around 700,000. Someone told me no, it's about 1.2. But if you rolled it back, that would be the cost of the water department. Well, you just about offset that with the unpaid bills on the pipe accounts. And maybe that's why the pipe accounts are so high, because they're not paying their bills, and their neighbor has to double up, pay for the bill. You know, so. It's more complex than just rolling the price back. I think we need to look at it and see where to go, but we need to talk to the county, to the cities, because it could impact them more. And I think Director Benson's right. If it, other than removing a target off someone's back because it appears they're getting an extra benefit or paying for somebody else's bill, we might be better off looking at another avenue, whether it's water, whatever.
So
power.
we will initiate that conversation with the cities, and perhaps that IRWMP is at least the most ready vehicle for it.
Well, for what it's worth, and I'd almost guarantee this, if we do cut it back, and there's a chance we could, I guarantee you the city's not going to cut it back to their people. You're going to get the same damn bill, because they're going to look at it like, wow, the golden egg. Mark my words.
May I say something, please? It's interesting because we were in a forum during the campaign, and one of the more prominent people in Holtville had no idea why he was paying so much water at home in his house in Holtville, and in relationship to what he was paying from the gate, at the gate. And I think a lot of people, it is very, very true. A lot of people they blame us for it. However, in all defense of the constituents, I have not heard anyone bitch, quote unquote, about the rates to us. They're very aware that it's either their city or town management that is bringing about these rates. I may be wrong. Mr. Mesa might be able to shed some light on this, but it's my understanding that in Calexico, the water rate is a flat minimum $200 whether the house is occupied or not. Okay? And so there are all these issues within the individual entities that we have absolutely no jurisdiction over. I urge my colleagues to continue to look at seeing what we can do, but the rest of it really depends on the city management. And as I know some of the cities, I could see them using this as a reason to either subsidize or put it in their general fund or do something else, anything except giving the discount to the ratepayers for whatever reason might be. And forgive me those of the city that may be watching or listening, but I don't seem to have a great deal of confidence that you would take this and say, yes, then we could go ahead and benefit the water users. In Calipatria, people pay more for water than they pay for their mortgage. I mean, there are some people that pay $150, $200 for mortgage, and their water bill is $250 a month. That's where you see the trees dying, and you see, and who can, on a fixed income, who can pay that? But that is an issue that has to be taken up by the municipality, not by us.
We have speakers from the public. Mr. Grand?
Mark Grand, City Councilman for the City of Imperial. There are a couple comments made here, and thank you for taking up the discussion, because we've been advocating for this since it first started. But there is a lot of issues. It's more complicated than everybody's making it to seem, though I do take umbrage with a couple of the comments that were made here. It is not a cash cow for the cities. The cities do have compliance issues, as Mr. Hanks said. We have to come up with new methods to clean the water, that type of thing. Yes, as Ms. Galindo said, there are issues inside the city that we have to deal with, and the rates are set by the cities. But it's a cumulative effort, too. You get these compliance issues from the state, but it also goes along with getting the water to us. And so if the cost of the water is less, that helps to keeping the water rates where they're at, or not raising them if we because the water has gone up. So there's a number of issues. So I look forward to sitting down and talking with you, because the water rates that we have are going to clean the water for constituents that are your constituents as well as ours. And so we want to keep those rates as low as possible, because we don't make any money. We don't make a profit in the city. We're not raising the water rates to put in the general fund, because you can't do that. Those are separate accounts. The water rates, the water capacity fees, all those are in separate funds. It's not part of our general fund. And so we have to maintain our water system. So when you have a water system like your canal system that's 50 years old, or 75 years old in the case of Imperial, 100 years old, a lot of those break. We have to have money in those accounts to be able to replace the pipes, because I don't care what you charge for the water. If you can't get it to the people, it doesn't make any sense. So we have to maintain those pipes and everything that go bad all the time. And so that's part of the rate that's there too. And so we need to sit down with you and see how we can work out different things to help the constituents that are also your ratepayers from the electrical side, to help them, because we're getting feedback too, and like the grand jury report. Well, why don't you go back and talk to the IID about their rates? That's not the only issue, but it is one of the issues. And so I look forward to sitting down with you and working this out.
Yeah, I think probably we all agree what's unfair is to put that target on the grower, like the treated water, the cost of that raw water going to the municipality is subsidizing the farms, and the amount of money we're talking about is minimal.
No, I think the question is, if it's coming down the same canal like it would be to the farmer, why is it so much more to go to the city? And we get that question from our constituents as well, is why it's coming in the deal. Well, there's probably reasons, and so
I'm going to put you on the spot.
Okay.
When we reduce your water bill, raw water, are you going to pass that back to the ratepayer?
I certainly will try. Like you with the
I'm going to expect it.
with the electric rates, you're going to try too.
I'm going to go one step further, Mr. Grand.
Okay.
I'm going to ask as a personal favor.
Okay.
I would like, and you don't have to do it tonight. Call me tomorrow.
Okay.
About 4 in the morning. I want to answer that. Find out how much water you use, how many people you serve, and what that comes to per account.
Okay.
Because it's going to be absolutely negligible.
Okay.
But I would like to know, and then you may also tell your constituents how much it actually costs them. Okay.
Right.
And so we would both know. It would be informational for me and for you, and I'd really like to have that.
Additionally, in that calculation, if you could find out your water use and find out what you're currently paying the IID at $68 an acre foot, and what your savings would be if it was $20 an acre foot.
Yes, that would be wonderful information to possess.
Okay.
And at the same time, like I was talking about before, if there was some type of conservation program where I'm sure at some point in time the amount of water that there's a certain amount you can handle. When you get beyond that, it really taxes your system. So
right.
Would you be better served if it was in some type of form of conservation efforts to help?
Well, and the state's bringing up new restrictions on cities and counties for conservation methods. And the last time we had a rate increase, we put it in a 3-tier system, which got us all kinds of negative feedback from the constituents, because the more you use, the more you pay for your water. Well, that's being required by the state coming up. Everybody's going to have to do that because they're trying to cut back on water use. And so it's a tiered effort.
Yeah, umbrella, they put water meters on us.
Yeah.
Funny how when the feds steal from you, it's okay, and the state steals from you, it's okay, but when you're trying to make a budget, locally, well, you're just the bad guys.
And Mr. Grant, you understand better than anyone that these cities have developed over time, and the ag industry and the ag families and the people that work in agriculture that have experienced the successes wouldn't have the sense of community without those cities, without the schools, without the hospitals, without the residents, without the workers, the lawyers, the tire services. So, it's just interesting that for 95 years the IID had the water rates the same, the ag and the municipal rates, and then all of a sudden, around their 100th anniversary, they changed that structure. So,
and I'm not hearing, none of us on at least on our city council have said anything about it should be it's the farmer's fault or anybody else's fault for water going up. We just want to know what the reasoning was, why it's higher, and if there's a good reason. And I haven't seen, I'll be truthful with you, I haven't seen that particular study, but it would be interesting to see, because a lot of these studies you can make them come out the way you want to. I mean, a lot of places.
No, you can't do that.
And so, at any rate, but no, I think it's a team effort. We have to all work together because we're all constrained by water use. We're all going to be under this. I saw something here recently about saying, the no matter whether we have the water rights or not, if Arizona's without water, it doesn't matter. Somebody's going to be there with a gun saying, "I'm going to take the water." But
they're going to have to pump it out of the ground first for a few years.
But we're all under this, and so let's work together. But I'm glad for the conversation, and so I think I need to learn more about that side, and you need to learn a little bit more about our side, so we can work together to make this even for everybody.
And don't leave here with any doubt in your mind. I'm willing to look at it and put it back where it was, because if it needs to be, it needs to be. But I want to see it to it. I want to see that it's passed on to those that have been that were supposed to be
Hey, I'd love my
saving.
rates to go down. I'm a water user myself.
I understand, and I think they'll go down, but I don't think it's not going to be that much. But hey, it is what it is. But I want to look at it.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank
Any other comments from the public?
Good afternoon, Board. My name is John Dantas.
Oh, we got a face with a name now.
Yeah, good-looking face.
Yeah.
Got some hair on it. Got some hair. Oh, you're lacking on top. All right. In terms of reducing rates, $48 difference on an acre-foot of water for a family, that only amounts to $4 a month. You're talking about, and chances are they use half of that. It'd be half of that. It'd be like $2 a month difference in their water rate. But I think those water districts need that money for the infrastructure and to keep their implements and their facilities up to date.
The municipalities.
Yeah. To keep them up. And I know I've been raising a lot of cane, but I didn't appreciate back in June when your PR person, her reasons for the water rates just didn't tally with anything I could come up with. And that kind of set me off on that. But we're learning, and I look forward to seeing what comes up. I live next door to the Ed Cooney, who's on the city board, and he says that they break their rates down in 2 phases, and if the water rate goes down, they'll reduce part of their bill. I mean, they have what it costs them to treat the water, and then what the water comes in. And he says that he would look forward to reducing that part of the bill too. But and as far as the water and everything going down the same canal for the growers as it is the municipalities, I mean, it's all traveling the same byways. I don't see what, I'll have to learn more about that. One aspect on the pipes. I have a friend who has a house and a shop and gets water off the pipe. And he says for some reason they changed the method of charging. Instead of just sticking with a 2-inch pipe, it said that he got a bill for 3 different locations because he has 3 electrical meters. He has one for his shop and one for the house. Excuse me, I said 2 properties. He has a house and a shop. He gets two bills. And he says, all I do at the shop, I don't have a restroom, I don't have a shower, I don't have a bedroom in my shop. I wash my hands and I might wash my pickup over there. But he's getting paid, he's getting double billed for coming off the same pipe.
That was a complaint that was brought to me on the pipe accounts, the same, you know, and I think in this case there was I think there was an office and maybe a garage, and one of them virtually didn't use water, but the other one was a larger water user, but the rates were the same.
And so you understand why he's getting charged twice off the same pipe.
Yep.
Take a look at all those pipe accounts.
I appreciate
John.
It's probably the guy who's not paying us.
it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments from the public? Okay, moving on. We have 2 items left. Information item 17, status of water transfer mitigation in Salton Sea. Page 120 of your agenda, and presenting is Bruce Wilcox.
Good afternoon. As a way of an explanation, occasionally we come to you with a status update on the water transfer mitigation. So just as a bit of brief background, remember that the JPA funds all of these mitigation operations. The 3 water agencies, IID, San Diego, and Coachella, pay into that JPA fund by contract amount. Annually, we do certain mitigation measures. We'll also talk a little bit about the Salton Sea at the end. This is just kind of an update of some of the things we've been doing lately in species specific. We're going to have burrowing owl population studies again in 2014 and 15. We're also looking at a study we've been asked to help look at the potential impact to the solar, particularly in the southwest corner, or southeast corner, southwest corner of the valley. We're looking at that with U.S. Fish and Wildlife. We've got some shorebird surveys we're in process. We're one of the few organizations that is allowed to trap for desert pupfish. 2 of our team members went through that training, voluntary training, spent a lot of their own time getting those certifications. They can now trap for pupfish. That saves the JPA some money long term.
Why do we trap for pupfish again, Mr. Wilcox?
It's a distribution model. Desert pupfish are protected under the state and federal Endangered Species Acts. So we're required to do certain kind of distribution modeling so we know what drains they're in, and so we can avoid mitigation activities during the season when they're breeding.
Understood.
The other reason for that is so that we can prove they're still there, and we can prove that our mitigation measures and conservation measures are working. And then finally, we're in the process of some marsh bird surveys. Just real briefly, because the team that works on this, Jessica, Kelly, and Victor, don't get much credit. You don't see them very much because they're always out working, like today, for instance. We've also been asked by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to participate in a study for solar. One of the issues that's come up in the last 6 months probably is bird impacts on solar panels. It's excuse the pun, a feather in IID's cap. When we're asked to do that, it kind of proves that we've got some pretty good scientists working for us, and all 3 of those folks deserve a lot of the credit for that.
Real quick, who asked you to do the study on solar in the Southwest?
It's U.S. Fish and Wildlife, DFW. Again, remember that one of the reasons that we want to monitor is mainly for burrowing owl populations. That we want to monitor those issues is because, to be completely frank, we don't want to get stuck with the impacts from them. So from the solar, fair enough that the solar is going in there, and you can argue about whether that's a good land use or not. Everybody has their own opinion, but we don't want to get IID doesn't want to get stuck later if the burrowing owl population drops. We need to know that the solar contributed to that and let those folks pay their fair share. The managed marsh, phase 1 has been completed. If you haven't been up, take a look at it. We're pretty pleased with it. We had a lot of help from a lot of folks that contributed to the design and the implementation. We currently have local folks doing a lot of the irrigation management. The success criteria for the managed marsh was the presence of Yuma clapper rails and California black rails. That's a Yuma clapper rail in the photograph there, so we've met that criteria. That's phase 1. It's about 360 acres. Phase 2, where we've just started initial planning. We just finished the paperwork for an MWA today, and hopefully that will be in front of the board for information at the next meeting. to construct the next phase, which will be roughly the same size and be constructed by the end of 2014. Currently, what we want to do is get some of the initial planning done and then take it to the Farm Bureau, we have to take it to the IT, the implementation team management group, and we'll also take it around to a few other places. We got a lot of good input in phase one. We know there's going to be some changes in phase two. We learned some things. One of the things I learned, quite frankly, is you should have IID construction and maintenance folks do the work, and we're going to try to do that again. They did a great job last time. They offered a lot of input, and a lot of the things that work best up there are things they suggested. So we're going to have the IID construction and maintenance crews involved to the extent they can be. In this phase, IID is doing the design work in-house. The engineering department's been working on that, just started on that, and we're pretty confident they can move forward with that. We will have to lease a bit of equipment. You'll see the MWA includes an RFQ or an RFP or whatever they're called these days for leasing of that equipment, but we'll try to do as much of it as we can in-house.
Question.
Sir?
We go back to that picture again.
Sure.
Does that bird have a pupfish in its mouth?
It does not. It has a crayfish in its mouth. And at this point, the crayfish is more endangered than any desert pupfish. Good eye, good eye.
I have a question. Is there a concern that the owl population will be affected? I mean, are we looking at that as a concern?
Solar?
Yes.
I don't know that there's a concern. There is a general concern in the valley that if you ever list the burrowing owl, it will be a bad news situation for agriculture and everyone else. So you sort of hedge your bets, I guess. We want to be able to do this survey, and I'm not trying to point fingers at the solar folks. That's not our idea. But if we can show that there was a population impact by solar in those areas, and I don't know that we will, but if we can, then if the population declines further in the valley, it's not IID's responsibility, it's the solar industry's responsibility. I don't anticipate a large decline. We have the largest population of burrowing owls in the United States, probably.
And growing.
I'm sorry?
And growing.
I hope so. I heard that. Some days I share your concern when I get called out at 6 o'clock in the morning to try and get one out of a burrow someplace. But if we don't manage that population, it's under pressure to be listed now by quite a few different organizations. We have the largest population. If we can continue to show population stabilization or increase, and so far we have, with the exception of 1 year, we're probably in much better shape than if we show a decline and have to deal with them as a listed species. So that's the genesis behind most of the work we do. The burrowing owl population, or the burrowing owl mitigation or conservation program in the valley, is recognized across California, at least, as one of the better conservation programs. So I think we're in pretty good shape. You just learn over the years as you've done this long enough that you can get blindsided by something that you didn't see coming. So this land use study is more of an insurance policy to make sure we don't get blamed for something.
So when these permits are issued, generally for whether they be pilot programs or bona fide solar programs, and the permits are issued generally by the county, by the time these permits are issued, have the studies been done on the population of the burrowing owls for that particular area?
Yeah, there is usually a study that's been done for the population in that area. We also have information on the populations in those areas, so we'll go back in 6 months and compare and see what the answer is, short term at least. So,
but by that time, the permits have been issued and work has already started.
That's right. That's right. The whole idea behind this study is to prove that it isn't an IID activity that caused that population decline.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry. Let me talk a little bit about air quality, which is a favorite topic of mine and quite a few other of the folks. As part of our air quality monitoring program, we've got the air stations installed. I've had them since 2009. We also were required to do a hydrology model. We just completed a new hydrology model. One of the questions that was asked earlier was or one of the discussions earlier was shortages on the river. We're going to go back to that hydrology model and look at what shortages on the river might mean for inflows for the Salton Sea. That will become important in just a minute. We also were required to do an exposure model. That's completed. So we now have an idea of year to year, or at least every couple of years, what will expose on the playa and how we might treat that. So that brings me to the next topic here, which is I think one of the ways that we can benefit both the JPA and the mitigation program and the valley, there are several different alternative land uses we might consider on some of these playa lands. Some of the obvious ones are agriculture, but one of the things that we've looked at in the last year or a little less is algae production, and there's different kinds of algae production. Biofuel, which has some promise, but one of the things that some of the private groups have looked at closely in the valley is algae production in sort of a niche market for production of feed or other products for fish food and other things like that. This is a photograph of a local group that's putting that in. Some of those folks are here tonight. I've had the privilege of working with them in the past. They know what they're doing when it comes to algae and other projects. One of the nice things about this is they've undertaken this themselves. They haven't come and asked us, the IID, JPA, anybody else for funding. They've done it themselves. But one of the things we think we can look at in the future is putting some of these ponds, these algae trenches, on playa land because it's flat. So there isn't much of a need for earthwork. There isn't a large need for support. You don't have to have a big foundation system or something, so it could fit on some of the playa lands. And then finally, we think there is this niche market that could be developed. It doesn't use, for the most part anyway, agricultural irrigation water. It can use return flow agricultural water, although my understanding is it has to be mixed to some extent. So we're really excited about these from a production point of view for some of the fish food and some of the other industries. And over the course of the next couple of years, we'll probably be coming back to the board to talk about how we best could manage that, how we can give some of the local folks in particular an advantage in moving forward with these projects. There also is algae projects that we're looking at for water quality control, and I know some folks have talked about the potential for that, and I think it's a big potential, but I also think we need to look at that a little closer before we look at that as the ultimate solution. Other solutions on the playa include the solar gradient or saline gradient ponds. We've talked about those before. I think Tom is still in the audience. We're almost ready to go under contract with Tom on a project that's funded through the state that looks at a small-scale saline gradient pond, what kind of evaporation we might get off of that, what kind of, interestingly enough, one of the byproducts is fresh water, and we're looking at that as using it for habitat. Then finally, just real quickly on the Salton Sea to kind of bring you up to date, one of the things that we've been working with the Salton Sea Authority is developing a plan for, there's been a lot of talk about this renewable energy initiative at the Salton Sea, and I think that's one of the better ideas in the last couple of years and has a lot of promise. One of the things we've been working with the advocacy groups and with the regulatory groups is trying to blend in a certain amount of habitat into this renewable energy scenario in the southeast corner, of the sea. The renewable energy zone is located in that area. We think that that's probably the best area, at least initially, for this whole program, and we've come up with some different ways to blend habitat into that use, taking the berms and the other things that the geothermal folks build and using that. So we're fairly excited about that. We'll roll that out actually this Thursday with the Salton Sea Authority. It's their plan. We just help them put it together. It seems to satisfy everybody's at least short-term interest and probably has a lot of benefit long-term for funding. So that folds into the Salton Sea Authority's $2 million fund that they're going to look at for long-term Salton Sea restoration. It is, I think, some of the first genuine movement in the right direction we've had in a while. This board deserves a lot of credit for that. The county deserves a lot of credit for that, and so does the Salton Sea Authority. And then, quite frankly, a couple of the team members and the group I work with who put a lot of extra effort into this to help develop this program. So I think that's the last slide. It is not the last slide. The financial assistance program, we talked briefly about the marine habitat project, that's Tom Septon's project. We think that has a lot of promise. The other one we're working on very closely is the Red Hill Bay project. The importance of this, besides providing habitat and controlling a fairly emissive area, that white coloring you see on there is a real fine salt dust that blows all over, is that it will prove the concept of sharing geothermal and habitat. Cal Energy's been very, very flexible with us on working on this project. There are some land use concerns on it. We're working through those. But we'll be able to build habitat on this area funded by the state that IID owns this property. It's leased to U.S. Fish and Wildlife. By partnering with all these agencies, we will have sort of developed or proved the model for future Salton Sea Renewable Energy Initiative. Happy to answer any questions.
You will be making a presentation Thursday at the Salton Sea Authority.
Roger and I will be making a joint the important thing to remember, at least from my perspective, is this is really the Salton Sea Authority's plan. They asked us to help. I'm pleased they did, and I'm happy to say we could. So,
And
yes.
That'll be at 10 o'clock Thursday.
Here, I think.
Yeah. Okay.
And the same presentation you did now is what you're working on then?
No, it'll be a different presentation. I actually sent it to you guys.
Perfect.
Burrowing owl, I hear it tastes like chicken.
Well, the only way it's any good is if you have a fairly large bowl of desert pupfish soup with it. So.
For dessert. Hey, Bruce, real quick, but there's been a lot of talk about the Salton Sea Authority plan and what is that plan and what is your involvement with that? Is that a moving forward plan, reviewing what it was and where it should go?
Yeah, I think it is. IID sits on the technical advisory group for the Salton Sea Authority. We have 2 board members that sit on the actual Salton Sea Authority board. The plan, the $2 million funding that the Salton Sea Authority got from the state of California is going to be used to address the Salton Sea Authority's plan, not the state's $9 billion unworkable, unfundable mandate for the sea, but an approach that the Salton Sea Authority developed a few years ago that, quite frankly, still has its own problems, including funding and including availability of water. But the idea is that we will move that program forward. That technical advisory group will be involved in looking at funding alternatives and looking at better ways to restore the Salton Sea. Smaller, most likely, quite frankly, but more sustainable, recreational components available to it, but a more realistic look, recognizing that nobody right now has $9 billion to spend. The Renewable Energy Initiative I see as a big part of it. What IID has done so far in that, and that's a lot of work, quite frankly, that IID's produced, will be given to the Salton Sea Authority to move their program forward. It's a real step in the right direction, and there's been a lot of coordination. And for the first time since I've been here, quite frankly, it seems like almost everybody is pulling in the same direction and moving forward. So I think that in a couple of years, you'll see a workable Salton Sea restoration plan. I'm not going to suggest it'll be funded in a couple of years, but I think you'll see it. I think everybody has to adjust their expectations for that plan because it's not going to be the 1950s Salton Sea.
Now, does the county sit on Salton Sea Authority?
They do. They also sit on the technical advisory board.
Okay.
As does CVWD and Torres Martinez.
Because when you hear the county's attorneys, it's like they don't have a seat at the table, but they do if we're moving forward with the same plan.
The attorney specifically doesn't, of course, but yes, somebody that speaks technical language does.
Through the authority, and that's come up. You know, why is it that IID and the county go back to the 2006 Salton Sea Authority plan?
Right.
It's simply a place saver, and with the proviso that they revisit hydrology and cost.
Okay.
Anything else?
Any other questions for Bruce? Thank you, Bruce.
Thank you.
Okay, final information item today, 18, is a review proposed changes to the accounts receivable write-off policy, page 127 of the agenda. Mr. Greg Broking.
In December of 2012, Internal Audit made a recommendation that the district implement a formalized policy to write off accounts receivable. So we've been working on that since then, and that's what's in front of the board today. There's a way of background. In 2012, the write-off for accounts receivable was 2.2 million, and in 2011 it was 2.4 million, which is roughly 0.57% of total energy sales. And speaking with our outside attorneys over various times, they say anything under 1% write-off is very good.
So these are all power accounts we're talking about, not water accounts?
This is probably, yes, power. Yes, energy. And so we'll be bringing this back to the board at the October 8th meeting for action. But what's included in the policy is a procedure that every year, like we've been doing the past couple of years, we bring all the accounts to the board for their approval for write-off. We'll continue to do that. One thing that's a little different is on damage claims. This policy will allow us through discussion with our legal counsel to write off claims and not bring those to the board. And what I can tell you that happens on occasion. Someone may have insurance, but it's only say $10,000 on property, and they'll hit a pole or something and cause say $15,000 worth of damage. And they, after investigation is determined, they don't have the wherewithal to pay anything above what their policy limit is. And the insurance company won't issue a check unless you say you settle the case in full. So those are the types. Those aren't the only types of instances where we would write off an amount. But that's an example. Other examples are people damage our property, and we do an investigation, and they don't have insurance or any assets to go after.
So when this comes back to us for action, Mr. Brooking, it'll be in. We'll have access enclosed or to a listing of these accounts receivable if we're so interested.
No, they'll be in public. I think we provide that.
We provide it in public by account and by name?
By account and by name, yes. I think that's what we've done in the past.
Didn't we do this before, and then it didn't work out, and we went back to not doing that?
I think that was water.
This will be energy.
Like Chairman Scotty put it the bad checks.
No, we did energy too.
What's that?
We did energy too.
So what are we going to do? I am curious about this. Are we going to bring it back in public and have a public listing of all these names, or do we keep some type of privacy involved here?
I think we should start a debtor's prison and throw them in there.
Well,
don't speak too soon until you see the lists.
The year is generally the first quarter of the year, March or April, when we bring it back as part of the annual audit.
Mm-hmm.
Put my service pipes on there too, Bruce.
Okay. Is there any other questions for Mr. Brooking? Very good. We'll close the meeting. It's 10 till 6.